Quote, "Elves revile and shun orcs in every realm I have walked. Likewise, orcs slaughter elves whenever they can. Rare is the land that does not see bloodshed between the two. This is no simple feud or clash of culture, but an enmity as old and deep as the world itself, as immortal as the gods who began it. It is a rage coursing through the veins of orcs like a torrent. It is a pulse of primal anger beating through the heart of every elf. Perhaps you have seen it at work." End quote. We've had many videos in the past talking about the gods and their power, and on all of those videos at the very top has always been 3 gods. The 3 most powerful gods in Dungeons & Dragons. We've already done a video on one, which you can find here, is the video on Moradin, the chief god of the dwarves, and today we're going to be talking about another. Today's topic is about Corellon Larethian, the chief god of the elves. Just like with Moradin, Wizards of the Coast back in 3rd edition categorized Corellon and Moradin being as divine rank 19 gods, with the max being rank 21, but there is no canonical god really that is 21, with perhaps the exception of Ao, but we've never been explicitly told about this entity and its power or where he would rank, and we don't really have any lore about him anyways. But yeah, in essence, to be divine rank 21, you would have to be basically the only god in a pantheon. Like, you would have to be the guy in a monotheistic religion. And we don't really have those in D&D, really. Instead, as far as power, we have Corellon for the elves, Moradin for the dwarves, and then, well, the human god that ranks at the very top. But for the sake of drama, I won't say their name. Hopefully we can make a video about them soon. But in any case, before we start talking about the most powerful god in Dungeons & Dragons, I would like to mention, this video is brought to you by HelloFresh. You guys know that lately I've been getting hard into just making my life in the kitchen a lot easier. I just don't have time for complicated things. I play D&D 4 times a week and I still have videos to make and gaming to do, and I know very well that you guys are busy too, because apparently everyone is too busy to play D&D in person, so HelloFresh is here to help you gain more free time by sending food directly onto your door. With foolproof, step-by-step recipes, pre-measured and pre-cut ingredients to eliminate as much prep time in the kitchen as possible. Having beautifully made and elegant meals in just 30 minutes, it's insane, and yet, here we are. Stop going into the grocery stores, there's no need for that anymore. Who has time for that? Restaurants? Not on my watch. HelloFresh is 72% cheaper than dining at a restaurant. There are tons of different options for you to pick from, many different kinds of diets that you can follow, and they even have fun seasonal recipes. Right now, they just released a set of Mediterranean recipes filled with fresh fruits and veggies, nuts, olive oils, and fiber-packed whole grains for a nourishing and deliciously balanced meal. Look, I have been having a blast cooking steaks and tilapias using HelloFresh. It's been so fun. It also teaches you how to be a better cook without having to learn yourself, or even worse, trying to learn while simultaneously dealing with buying seasonings and products that you don't even understand. I swear, some of those recipes online ask for the most random ingredients that I can literally never find. You do not have to worry about that anymore. Use my link or go to hellofresh.com and use code POGREX September 16th for 16 free meals across 7 boxes plus 3 surprise gifts. Once you click, my description will live update to count up the purchases. This is a great way to support the channel. The last time I did this, we got around, I think, 30. Let's see if we can beat that record. The live counter will be shown on the video description so that anyone can see. Go and click my link, use the code, and you will see that counter go up. Thank you guys so much. Now, on to the video. Okay, so who is Corellon Larethian? So to really understand this god, you have to know that he is really the embodiment of chaotic good. Just how you had Moradin as the embodiment of lawful good and how that made him stern and obstinate, rule follower and such, Corellon being chaotic makes him more free-spirited. And this concept really envelops everything about his personality, including his actual presentation and form. See, Corellon was originally not even like an elf per se. Corellon was really more of a concept, a being that didn't really have full form and shape. He was mountains and the breeze, and the concept of love and rage. He was a tree, then a rock, then a person, and then a feeling again. Gods in a lot of ways defy permanence sometimes in a way that makes it difficult for mortals to comprehend, and Corellon exemplified this more than any other god. It actually wasn't until he got married to Lolth, who at the time was called Oroshni, that he decided to settle on a shape that he would now present as for his sons and daughters, and he chose basically this that you're now seeing. He chose to be light-skinned and a male so as to contrast Oroshni, his wife, who was dark-skinned and a female. His shape was chosen to be aesthetically pleasing, to be lithe and elegant, dexterous for dancing and beautiful to behold. For the sake of description, the specific term that is used throughout every single description of Corellon is, quote, androgynous, end quote. So just by looking at him, you wouldn't be able to necessarily tell his sex. However, we know that he specifically favors the male sex for his forms, and the pronouns used throughout the lore has always been he for him, though most times the pronoun he would be used in quotations. The lore is also very explicit about the fact that he changes forms all the time, and that many elves see him and revere him many times as a he, as a she, as neither, but also as both. Now, Corellon's beginnings are always somehow tied with Gruumsh, Gruumsh being the main god of the orcs. Most of these stories revolve around Corellon tricking Gruumsh, specifically in terms of where the elves and the orcs would settle. See, we're talking about the beginnings of time, basically, and sometimes it is hard to tell exactly what is metaphor and what isn't. But basically, the gods were trying to figure, before creating their sons and daughters, what would become the dwarves, the halflings, the gnomes, the humans, the elves, and the orcs, what features they would give them, and where would they live. The idea being that they wanted everyone to have a spot in the worlds to call home. Elves would get the forests, dwarves would get the mountains, the gnomes would get the hills, the halflings the meadows, and then humans would sort of take what was left over, a little bit of everything. Now the story, as the orcs tell it, is that Gruumsh was tricked, presumably by Corellon, so that by the time that Gruumsh was left to decide where the orcs would live, there would be no place left for them. Quote, "There was silence upon the world then, as Gruumsh One Eye lifted his great iron spear and stretched it over the world. The shaft blotted out the sun over a great part of the lands as he spoke. No, you lie. You have rigged the drawing of lots, hoping to cheat me and my followers. But One Eye never sleeps. One Eye sees all. There is a place for orcs to dwell. Here, he bellowed, and his spear pierced the mountains, opening mighty rifts and chasms. And here, the spearhead split the hills and made them shake, covering them in dust. And here again, and the black spear gouged the meadows and made them bare. There, roared he who watched triumphantly as his voice carried to the ends of the world. There is where the orcs shall dwell, and they shall survive, and multiply, and grow stronger. And the day will come when they cover the world, and they shall slay all of your collected peoples. Orcs shall inherit the world you sought to cheat me of." End quote. There is a story that goes a little bit farther, though. It is considered to be heresy by both elves and orcs. The story claims that Corellon and Gruumsh were actually twin brothers, spawned by a mysterious unnamed deific entity that may or may not exist anymore. This entity, now lost to history, had the ability to see the future and saw what we now call the Dawn War, a massive cataclysmic war between the gods and the primordials, and he saw that his sons would be needed for this battle, otherwise all would be lost, and so he sacrificed himself to grant his sons mighty power so that they may live and, presumably, save the universe. Corellon was imbued with intelligence and light, Gruumsh with savagery and darkness, Corellon with grace, Gruumsh with brutality, Corellon with agility and Gruumsh with vitality. One was given reason while the other rage, one beauty, the other ugliness. Corellon was granted the gift to create while Gruumsh the gift to destroy. The last gift was then the gift of arcane magic to Corellon, for he would have the wisdom and the care to deliver it to mortals, while Gruumsh was given the most powerful gift of all, the ability to see the future, a gift meant to compensate for the lack of intelligence and ugliness. Corellon and Grumsh were then destined to be mirror images of each other, but completely opposite, and as history would tell it, they would enter conflict immediately and until the end of time. So their stories are very much correlated, so much in fact that the literal birth of the elves came from this conflict. Elves were born from the blood of Corellons. Now, some stories say that it was just the blood, while others say that the tears of Sehani and Moonbow were also involved, but in any case, the blood in the vast majority of stories always comes from the battles between Corellon and Grumsh. When Grumsh would hurt Corellon, and Corellon would bleed, that blood would turn into the first elves. But I am getting a little bit ahead of myself. The story goes that both Grumsh and Corellon fought together, side by side, in the Dawn War, and that they were instrumental in that victory. However, Corellon actually joined this war much later than Grumsh. Grumsh being there from the very beginning. And much of the resentment that Grumsh had towards Corellon was actually built here in this war, when even though he had been fighting non-stop from the beginning for the good of the gods, he never got as much recognition as Corellon did, even though Corellon joined in late. The mortals that had been created by then venerated Corellon much more than Grumsh. The other gods seemed to like Corellon much more than Grumsh. And then when victory was achieved and it became time to stake a claim onto the worlds, Grumsh saw that no space were made for his orcs on most of these worlds. And this is where things got a little bit out of control in the mind of Grumsh. Now, eventually, something of a truce was made between Corellon and Grumsh, because they had been fighting for a while at this point, before and after the Dawn War. They had set up this meeting so that they could make peace with one another, finally. Now, before I go further, we do have to talk about Corellon's personality. See, most of what the elves are come from him. Their attitudes, their personalities, their cultures, they're all reflections of Corellon in one way or another. But of course, Corellon would be the idyllic form of those factors. Corellon is cocky. He believes himself to be better than everyone else in strength, in form, in beauty, ability, all that stuff. However, he doesn't let that get the better of him. And out of the many gods of the multiverse, Corellon is one of the few that strive to learn from mortals. He knows that he doesn't know everything. Now, he believes he knows more than everyone else, but he knows he doesn't know everything. He also has a very kind heart, what you would expect from a divinity of the chaotic good alignment. Now, Corellon wanted to make peace with Grumsh, but he knew that if Grumsh betrayed him, that he was much stronger, better, more beautiful and graceful than Grumsh, and that he would persevere. And there was never any doubt on Corellon's mind that Grumsh could get the better of him, and so he decided to meet Grumsh away from Arborea, his heaven, instead in a neutral place. He gave Grumsh advantage after advantage. They met in a hilly region, not a forest. Corellon surrendered his ability to banish Grumsh away from the meeting place, and he even made an oath not to use any high magic during that meeting. Of course, Grumsh had no intention of actually making a peace deal. Instead, he ambushed Corellon to kill him, which resulted in a battle that spanned for, well, we don't really know. Time is funky in heaven. It could have been hours, days, weeks, or even months. The point is, it was during this great battle where the famous scene of Corellon slashing Grumsh's eye comes from. It was said that this is where the term one-eyed Grumsh comes from, and it is believed that through this cut of his eye, Grumsh lost the ability forevermore to see the future. Now, Corellon almost died on this battle, and most of the battle was really Corellon just running away. The reason for this was because Corellon was betrayed from within by none other it's not really a spoiler, you guys know, by Oroshni, Corellon's own wife, who wanted to take over as queen of the Seldarine. It turns out Oroshni had colluded with Grumsh to murder Corellon. What she did was she enchanted the sheath of Corellon's sword, so that when he unsheathed his weapon, the weapon would shatter. So Corellon was mostly fighting without a weapon for most of that encounter, but eventually, thanks to the intervention of the Seldarine, they would help him restore the blade mid-battle, which allowed Corellon to cut Grumsh's eye and make his escape. Grumsh, realizing that he would never be able to get a chance like that ever again, decided instead to focus more on destroying the elves rather than killing Corellon, and has basically made it his main focus to create orcs and breed them and urge them to destroy all the elves that they can find and obliterate all of their creations. But unfortunately, as some things might always be, Corellon ended up trading one mortal enemy for another. Oroshni, who at the time was Corellon's wife, was actively working against him, trying to kill him. We talked about this in depth on our Illustrais video, so I would recommend you checking that out. But basically, Oroshni colluded then with a bunch of gods who wanted the elvish gods dead. We're talking Malar, an evil god of the hunt, Maglubiet, the goblin god, and a bunch of other goblinoid and ogre gods, and lastly, Gonadar, a terrible god of oozes and slimes. They all came into Orvandor to try and assassinate all the elf gods. Now, the elvish gods of course persevered, and Oroshni was ousted as the betrayer, though much to the dismay of Corellon, it turned out that his own son, Veyron, was also collaborating against him with Lolth. And so he banished all of them away from Orvandor and loudly proclaimed Oroshni a demon, which would be when she changed her name then to Lolth, the demon goddess of the drow. Quote, Corellon's epic battle with Grumsh One-Eye, leader of the Orc Pantheon, is legendary, and the pair of pantheistic patriarchs have never reached a lasting truce in their never-ending battle over territory. Malar's relentless attacks on the Seldarine and the Fair Folk have likewise earned him Corellon's eternal enmity. The rift between Corellon and his former lover Oroshni, now known as Lolth, is still as bitter as the day he banished the Spider Queen to the Abyss and named her Tanari. The Protector's rift with his errant son Veyron is nearly as deep, and the Protector has despaired of the Masked Lord ever repenting of his evil ways. In his vigilant defense of elves and their homelands, Corellon has earned the enmity of countless powers whose worshippers seek to seize the forests, magic, or wealth of the fair folk. End quote. So as you can see, Corellon has been through a lot, but not just against his personal life. There are countless gods who have spent eternity hurting and seeking to destroy that which he created, his beloved elves. And so, in spite of the fact that Corellon loves to just happily dwell in the forest, to create beautiful art, to sing merry songs, and enjoy the bounties of life, he is basically forced to play the role of defender, to protect his people, his pantheon, and his life against the onslaught of forces vying against him. This is why the title that he has earned from his people, the elves, is the Protector. When an elf prays to Corellon, they pray to the Protector. When they find an avatar of Corellon roaming the lands, he does not roam inside nor outside of their civilization, but the walls, the edges of the forest, the rims of the elvish kingdoms. He stands guard, ever present, never sleeping, to make sure that his creations survive having the world against them. Quote, Corellon is a powerful warrior god whose hands protect his creations with the gentleness of a sculptor and the unspeakable power of a master sword swinger. While other deities may reflect the joy, delights, and accomplishments of the fair folk, Corellon stands as an ever-vigilant watcher over them. His life spirit flows from and into the elves and their lands, and while mortal elves daydream and enter the reverie, Corellon never abandons his watchfulness. Only when it is time for the fair folk to pass from Faerun to Orvandor does he finally cease watching over each elf and allows Sehanine to take a larger role in caring for them. Corellon frequently wanders the elven lands and borders in disguise, often in the form of one of the diminutive Sylvan race, observing the actions of priests and craftfolk and defending elven homelands from interlopers. Though his martial might is swift and terrible, the soft-spoken creator of the elves is ever humble and always open to learning something new, one of his sources of might. End quote. If you're interested in learning more about the elves in general, I would highly recommend these set of videos that I did specifically about the elves. In there, I talk about some of their beginnings, what they had to go through fighting amongst each other, and also, very importantly, how elvish magic works. Having a god as ancient and as powerful as Corellon, whose portfolio, among many things, is magic, allows for the elves to do so much that others cannot. Elvish high magic, which is regulated and controlled by Corellon, is the most powerful type of magic in the world, and it is what allows elves, even to this day, to be able to cast spells higher than level 9. Though the magical tiered system is more for traditional spellcasting, elves are a bit beyond that with high magic, but if you care to know about that stuff, you should watch those videos. Anyhow, enough about Corellon from the past, let's talk about the now. Corellon, Larethian, and the Sildarine, that's the name for the Elvish Pantheon, I guess I should have probably mentioned that before, but anyhow, they live in Arvandor, which is the first layer of the heaven of Arborea. We will cover Arborea on its own video once we continue on our quest to cover all of the other planes, but it is worth at least mentioning that originally, Corellon was born in Isgard. That's why on our Isgard video we talked about how there are entire communities of Dark Elves that still live there to this day, including of course our beloved Elistrae. But yeah, in a titanic battle, Corellon and the Sildarine defeated the giants that used to live in the first layer of Arborea and then took the place for themselves. Now, you don't have to go to Arborea all the way over there to see Corellon. Like we talked before, he does enjoy coming into the material plane to help his elvish children, like a lot. So let's talk about how that would look like. Corellon wields two main weapons, a long sword and a longbow. The sword is named Sahandrian, and it is said to be made out of a star. Its special ability is it always lets Corellon know who is the strongest enemy before him. Anyone not from the Sildarine who grabs it is said to take on a bunch of damage. This damage changes from being just a lot to being an instant kill depending on the source, but in some books it just deals a flat 100 damage if you try and pick it up as deadly. His bow is named Amlath Hana, and it allows Corellon to never miss with any shot he ever makes, provided that the shot, of course, is targeting someone who is at most a mile away from Corellon, and that Corellon can actually see the individual. He also wears an amulet in the shape of a symbol, which is a crescent moon within a large circle. This amulet functions as a talisman of pure good. You can also typically find him carrying a wand, which functions as a staff of power, a staff of the Magi, and a wand of frost all at the same time with unlimited uses on all of its abilities. Quote, Corellon usually appears as an androgynous male elf of truly unearthly beauty and grace, although he can assume the form of either sex. Despite his obvious strength, the primary impression the creator of the elves radiates is that of litheness and swiftness, and he is possessed of incredible speed and reflex, end quote. And the clothes that he wears changes over time, but typically they are covered under a sky blue cloak. Now, the overpowered thing about Corellon is that he is a god of magic, and technically, he is stronger than Mystra, so even in avatar form, he can just cast any spell he desires because he has access to high magic, of which he can cast basically at will. And this is like world-changing magic, so yeah, again, watch these videos if you're interested in finding out about high magic. I will say though, there is only one school of magic that Corellon avoids, and one that he generally forbids elves to use, and that is shadow magic. This is a school of magic that is kind of hidden in 5th edition, but you can see it in different places. It is the kind of magic that allows you to do damage with illusions, so spells like Shadow Blade or any spell with the Phantasm moniker, those all count. Corellon hates those spells since he believes that it leads to corruption. Now, other than his elvish form, Corellon sometimes also likes to take on the shape of a blue cloud that envelops living people, or weapons, or any kind of geological formation. It floats around them in an aura of flickering sky blue flame. Now, being able to tell what is and what isn't Corellon is obviously very important to the elvish people. It seems trying to figure out what is an omen or what is just like a normal blue cloud is kind of, it's kind of crucial. So generally speaking, when Corellon approves of something, he will give you diamonds, moonstars, moonstones, star rubies, or star sapphires. If no precious stone, then any stone with a general crescent shape. Otherwise, a falling star is a really good omen from Corellon, but clerics will also look for any particular blue star in the night sky, or even just like the mere presence of a particularly blue-tinted moon would be considered a blessing from Corellon. When Corellon is upset, on the other hand, what you look for are falling stars that appear to fall from the upper tip to the lower tip of a crescent moon. So basically, if the moon looks like it dropped a tear, then it would be considered a really bad omen. Otherwise, yeah, trees showcasing the colors of the season of fall way before their time, or the sound of specifically 3 twigs snapping in rapid succession. Those would be considered bad omens from Corellon. So if you are an elvish cleric and you're casting the spell Augury, I guess now you know what to look for. Now, as far as the Church of Corellon goes in Elvish lands, it is not so dissimilar from how it is with dwarves in that basically everyone venerates Corellon. Even those elves that strongly favor other deities within the Sildarine, they still recognize that Corellon is their creator. But not only that, Corellon had a direct hand in banishing the Dark Elves into the Underdark, which basically ended their civil war that many elves were fighting at the time. Corellon also helped the Creates create Evermeet, which is nowadays the main homeland of the elves, since Faerun doesn't really have a place for them anymore. So in general, for these things, and the fact that Corellon is like super active in helping elves, everyone just kind of venerates him in some way. However, it is worth noting that the actual priesthood of Corellon don't actually take leadership roles within the elvish communities, since at the end of the day, these priests replicate much of how Corellon behaves rather than what his actual title is. So see, Corellon Larethian is the leader of the Sildarine, and that's like his title, but the way he actually behaves is, again, more of a protector and artist. And that's effectively how his priesthood behaves. They mostly exist outside of the main elvish cities, protecting the kingdom and settlements from outside threats, and generally receding among the borders, while simultaneously creating amazing works of art. Quote, Corellon is venerated in rocky areas of natural beauty, always with a special place for viewing the moons and stars. Temples of the Protector are rare, however, since the elves are individualistic when it comes to his worship. Shrines are more common, but they are little more than clearings with a good view of the sky. His temples are shaped from great natural geological formations, including shallow caves entered from above, natural amphitheaters, and great rock spires. Trees and other plants are woven onto such edifices, resulting in great natural cathedrals woven of stone and plants, end quote. Now, the priesthood of Corellon are statistically more male, but by a fairly low margin, with 55% being male and 45% being female. Novices of Corellon are called Faerna, while the full priests are called Faernsora. Now, there are multiple ranks within the clergy, and they go as follows. In ascending order, we have the Protectors, then the Peacekeepers, Holy Warriors, Lightbringers, Joybringers, Wild Stars, Moonblessed, Great Protectors, Great Peacekeepers, and lastly, the Great Holy Warriors. Any clerics above Great Holy Warriors would instead have individual titles, but collectively, those high priests would be called the Cormira, which means the blessings of Corellon. Now, interestingly, there is no particular requirement to be like a specific type of elf to be a cleric of Corellon. It appears that he grants divine spells to really any kind of elf, including half-elves, which is very, very interesting. Actually, 12% of the priesthood are half-elves, and the lore even states that dark elves can be clerics of Corellon. Now, out of the whole priesthood, we know that 38% are clerics, 28% are paladins, and only 4% are wizards. Now, the remaining 30% there of the priesthood falls into what we call specialty priests, which is a topic that we really haven't touched on yet. See, most of the people in the Forgotten Realms venerate multiple gods. A society in general is extremely polytheistic, and it makes sense why it would be. You pray to the gods of the sea when you are in the sea. You pray to the gods of agriculture when you farm, and you pray to the gods of health when you're sick. In Dungeons & Dragons, it is generally understood that even if you favor a particular god, you're still venerating other gods. And that's why clerics, for example, get access to so many spells, when in reality, your god would only give you access to like very specific domains. So for example, if you were like a cleric of a god of healing, that god would probably not grant you inflict wounds, yet you still have it. Well, anyways, specialty priests are priests who only, and I mean only, venerate one god. You don't follow a pantheon, you do not pray to other gods, you only specifically follow the tenets of the one god. For Corellon Larethian, his specialty priests are called Fae Wardens. So what does it mean to be one of these? Well, you are to be, quote, both wardens and sculptors of magic's endless mysteries. Through art and craft, bring forth the beauty that envelops and let the spirit gambol unfettered. The song of joy and the dance of freedom shall ever soar on the wings of those who dare take flight. Guard against the slow death of stultifying sameness by seeking out new experiences and new ways. Ward against those who seek only to destroy in their inability to create and commune with the natural and mystical world. Be ever vigilant in force of arms and might of magic against any return of the banished darkness, and also be strong in heart against the corruption from within which allowed the Spider Queen to foment the chaos and evil of the Crown Wars." End quote. Now, what does it actually mean in practicality? Well, it means that you're expected to take an active role on the defense and artistic development of your Elvish civilization. If there are disputes among Elvish clans or cities, you are supposed to get in there and help mediate it. That includes not just elves, but mediating between other species. You're like the ranger of the elves, trying to figure out how to make sure that your people and that humans live together in harmony, or your people and the Fae, which can also be sometimes tricky. If orcs are going crazy, it is your job to kill them. If drow are trying to corrupt your people, you're expected to find out and quell it. All of this while simultaneously crafting beautiful pieces of art and instructing other elves on how to improve their artistic skills. See, it is a lot of work, because you have to be an artist, you have to be a warrior, and also a diplomat all at the same time. But that's the thing. Being a Fae Warden means that you are the literal example of the perfect elf. Everything that an elf should be, you are, because Corellon is everything that an elf should be, and you're striving to be that. Now, if you guys are interested in playing a Fae Warden, I've actually gotten together all of their abilities and features, and even spells, into a playable subclass of the Cleric. The Fae Warden was playable like way back in the day, so what I have done here is I've transferred all of his abilities over and transformed them into 5th edition. It includes Fae Warden specific spells like Sixth Sense, Augment Artistry, Sylvan Creature Form, and Crystallomancy. Spells that were created way back in the day specifically for this specialty Cleric, and I have transferred them all over to 5th edition for you. This is all free. I'm not charging anything for this. You can just click on the link in the description and you can download it. It's not like a full PDF. There's no art for it or whatever. It's just like a small thing that I wanted to put together for you guys, for those interested in perhaps playing this. If you would like me to make stuff like this for my videos whenever I talk about a specific subject, then let me know in the comments below. I don't mind at all doing cool stuff like this. Just please make sure to like the video and drop me some comments. It helps me out. It supports me by pushing me over on the algorithm. So anything that you can do, greatly appreciated. Or you can support me by actually like buying something from my PDF store. That's really incredibly helpful. Anything that you guys can do helps me out tremendously. Thank you very much. But now, suffice it to say, these clerics use longswords and longbows. They favor using sky blue cloaks and elven chainmails whenever possible. If you were wondering about how elves use longswords when they are more of a dexterous race, well, let me tell you something about mithril. If you're interested in playing with mithril weapons or how to make mithril armor, you might want to check out my Armor Redesigned PDF. I got rules in there for adamantine, mithril, exotic leathers, everything that you need for your armor and weapon needs. But basically, mithril makes things a lot lighter, so you can use longswords using your dexterity. Makes sense. But anyways, now, most of the work that Corellon has its priests do, like I said, have a lot to do with the general Elvish community and diplomacy around their civilizations. However, every once in a while, Corellon will issue a grand quest to a favorite priest. And when that happens, it does get a bit interesting because those quests tend to be far different than the general day-to-day business of the Corellon clergy. These quests has these elves return lost artistic masterpieces of their heritage. Of course, we're talking about going adventuring. As you know, the elves migrated out of Faerun, and as you can imagine, they had to leave many things behind in their exodus. Fae Wardens are sometimes tasked with finding their way back into these ancient elvish ruins and reclaim lost art that was left behind, or sometimes defeat monsters in order to retake stolen elvish artifacts. But now, to finish off the video, if you're interested in Corellon's stats, his avatar form has 30 strength, 44 Dexterity, 24 Constitution, 35 Intelligence, 29 Wisdom, and 29 Charisma. If you are building his avatar, know that he's supposed to have 19 levels in Fighter, 20 levels in Wizard, and 10 levels in Cleric. And that is in addition to having a 20 hit die base as a creature. That would give him around just about 1,000 hit points or so if you're building him exactly as how his avatar would be, using averages for his hit dices. He would have all the spell slots that you would expect him to have for all of the classes combined, with the exception that his wizard spellcasting is actually way empowered, since he actually has 2 12th level spell slots, 2 11th level spell slots, and then 2 10th level spell slots, with over like 5 9th level spell slots. So he's nutty. His avatar can see, hear, touch, and smell at a distance of 9 miles. He can also, as an action, perceive anything within 9 miles of any of his worshippers, holy sites, holy objects, or any location where one of his titles or names is spoken within the last hour. So if he has an avatar currently in Faerun, and you mention his name while in Waterdeep, if Corellon would have spent an action to do this within that last hour, he would have been able to not just sense you, but he would be able to see 9 miles around you. It's crazy. I would like to thank my Patreon supporters: Barry Mascan, 5e Magic Shop, Morgan Johnson, Rusty Rain, Doc Feeder, The Great Codini, Omega Scales, Terry Culp, Folky951, Ordoric, Sabim Kurshap, Thomas Hunt, Soulless Rider, Stalia, Trev909, Trevor Hess, Stephen, The Living Guild Pack, Describe, The Wizard's Vault, Herbert Johnson, James the Perverted, Shoddycast, Jesse Feliciano, Lucas Cyrek, Naxtor Ashura, John Harley, Shane and Sam Skinner, Sir Ignatius Thunderblade, Warren Smith, Wyvern Claw 00, Alyssa Kestrel, Chrissy 3, Murden Games, Loa, Falcon Scientist, Richard Sawyer, Mavrath Master of Secrets, Lauren, Vector X-Man, Guy Broman, and Mediocre at Best for supporting me on Patreon at the $25 level. If you would like to support me as well, then please head on over to patreon.com/MrRex to support. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for being here, please check out the PDF store, and I'll see you all next time.